So if you've been watching my content for some time, you're probably aware that I'm a fan of German watches and NOMOS. Amongst their club collection, their Orion collection, their Ludwig and Tangente, you're getting some really good value for money when looking at the entire marketplace. But of those collections mentioned, I think the one that's probably underserved the most is the Ludwig. And today though, we're gonna be looking at a few models that are new additions to this line, and I think are gonna add some nice fuel to this collection and what it has to offer. Now, I think some of you guys watching probably are aware that I've owned a NOMOS Orion for around 4 years. It's a watch that has some sentimental value to me and was in my first video that I ever posted on this channel about 3 years ago. So really love that watch. And when looking back, I do recall actually thinking about getting that Ludwig instead of the Orion. No regrets, but that is a great watch as well. And I did a full review looking at those 3 entry-level dress watches from NOMOS. So if you have not seen that video from earlier this year, I will link to it down below. But as mentioned, today we're gonna be looking at 3 different models from the Ludwig collection that were just released, celebrating 175 years of watchmaking in Glashütte. And guys, just to interrupt this, before we get too far into this video, I did release a blog looking at over 30 minimalist style watches. So if you like this style of watch that's coming with this Ludwig, I have a whole variety of watches that I have mapped out in this article on my website, teddybaldassarre.com. If you're there, you like what you're seeing, definitely browse around, look at the watches that we have available. Have some great German brands available like Junghans and Laco, for example, that have very similar style with some of their watches. So shop around, watches, straps, and definitely check out that blog down below. I'll link to it in the description. But now back to these Ludwig models. These 3 timepieces were released as a way to honor, again, the hometown where NOMOS watches are produced in Glashütte. A small city of roughly 7,000 people located south of Dresden in the east part of Germany has been the center of watchmaking for the country for the past 175 years, being home to brands like Lange, Glashütte Original, and of course, NOMOS. These 3 limited edition pieces aim to honor this long history of watchmaking in Glashütte, all featuring glossy enameled dials, so let's take a closer look at all of them from a high level. First, looking at what I will say the standard 35mm version, we have a case size, 35mm. We have a thickness of 6.8mm, lug width of 18mm, lug to lug of 44.9mm, water resistance 30 meters, movement is an alpha manual, crystal is sapphire, and then the price $2,260. Moving to the Ludwig Neomatic, we have a case size of 39mm, thickness of 7.2mm, lug width of 19mm, lug to lug of 48.5mm, water resistance of 50 meters. Movement, we have an automatic DUW 3001. Movement I'm very familiar with, being in my NOMOS Orion Neomatic. Crystal, we have a sapphire, and then price of $3,800. And for the last one, we have the Ludwig Datum. Case size 41mm, thickness 7.8mm, lug width of 20mm, lug to lug of pretty sizable 50.9mm, water resistance of 50 meters. Movement is an automatic DUW 6101. Crystal is sapphire, and retail price of $4,200. Starting with these watches on the wrist, all of them wear quite differently, but do share one common attribute, which is that they're flat across the wrist, across all 3 of them, with all of them being under 8mm. The 35mm wears exactly the same as my NOMOS Orion for the most part, which to me is a great size for the majority of the wrists out there when it comes to a dress piece especially. On the surface, hearing the case diameter of 35mm might seem small, but when it comes to NOMOS, that size is going to wear larger given the longer lugs, and in this case works in its favor as the lugs extend out pretty straight off from the case. When it comes to the larger Neomatic and Datum, the lugs are not as forgiving, as the lugs are going to be scaled to match the larger cases of 39 and 41mm, which make them harder for me to pull off given a bit of overhang on the Datum, especially with a lug to lug of 51mm, which is just going to be a little bit too large for my wrist. The lugs all have drilled lug holes, which to me is a big plus, given the ability to switch out straps easily, despite perhaps not being a feature typically seen on dressier watches. But NOMOS's more avant-garde approach to design makes this normally clashing idea just feel right. Now, one of the strongest aspects when purchasing my Orion years ago was the strap actually. As I still have it and wear it regularly with my Orion, the Shell Cordovan straps are stiff at first but age beautifully with consistent wear and transition from kind of that glossy shine that you'll find here to a more matte and non-reflective aesthetic. Transitioning to the dials of these pieces, like most NOMOS watches, these are always done well, and if you do find yourself leaning in the direction of this style, I think you'll be in favor of these as well. One thing that you'll notice when examining these three dials compared to what we typically see from NOMOS is that all three of them come in enamel that shines with a glossy, smooth texture, which adds a great touch to their more minimal layout of these pieces, especially looking at this stark outline of the sub-seconds. Just love the way that that was executed here. Another area of differentiation here is the hands, instead of being the typical thin baton pencil style, are tempered blue across all three and follow more of a leaf style, which is also followed by the sub-seconds on all three. Along the dial outskirts, the watches feature Roman numeral markings within the railway style minute track along the outside. The datum and neomatic both have the printing of neomatic beneath the brand logo at the 12, and the datum features a date aperture at the 3 that uniquely features the date in Roman numerals, and with the help of the caliber within, allows the user to actually rotate the crown in either direction at the second pulled out position in order to change the date in both directions. So some really nice functionality with the movement here. Now, when it comes to NOMOS overall, I think a lot of people naturally think about the dial designs, the case designs with those longer lugs. Those are really the things that typically stand out for people. But I think one thing that has to be mentioned, you probably can make a strong argument that this is really where NOMOS separates themselves in the price ranges that they occupy, is delivering great finished movements for the price. So with these watches featured here, we have essentially two levels of movements being delivered. First, with the 35mm, we have NOMOS's most basic movement, their alpha manual. And by basic, I certainly use that term in regards to the standard of NOMOS and not the industry, as for $2,000 and under, you will be hard pressed to find a better looking movement that also comes with great performance. The movement is NOMOS's take on the old school Peugeot 7001, developed using their own in-house components and staff to construct. The movement has a well-executed machine finish with glashütte ribbing across the 3/4 plate, polished edges, tempered blued screws, perlage finish beneath the balance, and a finely executed spiral finish to the ratchet and crown wheel. When it comes to the neomatics, we have what I would say to be that next level up in the hierarchy of NOMOS watchmaking. The movements within the 39mm neomatic is the DUW 3001, a movement that I'm again quite familiar with as a result of it residing within my NOMOS Ahoy Neomatic that I've owned for a couple of years. And in the datum, we have the DUW 6101. Both of these automatic calibers feature glashütte ribbing across the 3/4 plate and on the balance bridge, features polished edges, tempered blued screws again, and a blued balance wheel, perlage finishing on the base plate, and offers NOMOS's proprietary escapement known as their swing system, with the movements being adjusted at 6 positions. Now these movements share similarities, however there are some subtle differences, first with the size, as the DUW 3001 comes with a 28.8mm diameter and the DUW 6101 comes with a diameter of 35.2mm, hence the need for the larger case here. In addition, the DUW 6101 within the datum offers a 42-hour power reserve, an hour difference from the 43-hour power reserve from the 3001. And the 6101 also features an elevated rotor and is finished with a gold-plated embossing. And from a finishing standpoint on all three of these movements, I think they're certainly in the conversation for some of the best in each of these different price ranges. Okay, so now to just unpack here, and I just realized that I forgot to do something in the background at the beginning of this video, so leave a comment down below if you can figure it out. Bonus points for you. But overall, I think these are some really good looking pieces across the board. The only challenge is, I think, with the larger case sizes, and I think this is something that NOMOS is still trying to figure out as they've now started to deliver watches from a higher case size, is how do they continue to keep that beautiful scale, which I think works really well with the proportions of the 35mm case when looking at that lug to case ratio that might not be as pleasing on that larger case size of 39mm and up. I've never had issues with it because I've never really looked to that direction, but I think this might be a little bit of a challenge for some people. I think for those that do like a larger case, this will work. But for those that do want these to kind of wear more true to size, I do think those lugs are going to be quite large and maybe size a few people out. But from a dial point of view, as well as from a movement point of view, I think these are very well done, and I think they are very attractive looking pieces. Just be interested to hear your guys' thoughts about what you think of them as well. So guys, if you did dig this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. What other watches would you like me to cover in the future? I'm trying to cover some more watches here going into the summer. Love to see what you guys would want me to try to get my hands on. And also while you're at it, head over to teddybaldassarre.com, check out what we have available, shop around different straps, watches. It's a great way to support the content. Basically any purchase there is just gonna go infuse right back into the content so I can continue to do this. Also, if you want to stay up to date with content, great way to do it is also follow me on Instagram so you can stay up to date, see what's coming down the pipe, and kind of communicate with me on a day-to-day basis. So guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.